when a situation where you find that a person look at the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
because I have said that.
All right, thank you for staying. You're watching Daybreak, reaching you live from the nation's capital. We have the dailies that we'll be looking at today. We have about 5 or 6 rather. We'll begin with the Daily Trust newspaper. The lead story here says Nigeria to lose 1.2 billion naira rather, and that's daily over a Jeep oil export cut. It has the riders that says power outage worsens as electricity grid collapses. Minister operators in emergency meeting. So just like I said, it looks like our petroleum industry is in a bit of a crisis. I forgot the price of diesel is also around 720, thereabout, per liter.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know. Something is really happening that needs, you know, an urgent attention. You have other stories there at the top. Mixed reactions over RCCG, PFN's new departments of politics. And then you see strike extension, parents, students lambast ASU and the FG, you know, rightfully so. The next story there, beside the pictorial, says Nigeria recorded 1,060 vaccine polio virus cases in 2 years, and that's according to the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, Kano, APC. Tricky options before Shekarau's G7. And then the next one there, FG redeems House allocation promise to 1994 Nations Cup winners. You'd find it on the Daily Trust. Now below the pictorial there, you see Jet A1. Airlines marketers agree on 500 naira per liter for 3 days. These are the stories on the front page of Daily Trust this morning.
Okay, in the Punch newspaper this morning, blackout as national grid collapses. Federal government summons emergency meeting. And the writers there say discos alert power consumers as 19 power plants record zero output. FG, TCN, Gencos, NNPC, oil firms, others hold marathon session. And then you see the rider that says major firms, public institutions suspend services as blackout lingers. Still on the Punch right on the top on page 21, federal government may spend 93% of revenue on interest in 2022, says IMF. And on page 17 and page 11, reps NNPC intervene as flight cancellations leave passengers stranded. Wike, Obaseki continue verbal war. Governors allege betrayal, unguarded comments. And you'd also see a pictorial there that shows you the trial of Abba Kyari, you know, and others, confusion as Kyari's wife slums in court. Suspended DCP remanded. We all saw that video yesterday, and you know, it made quite a round on social media. You see all the stories on the Punch. 12 days to convention, APC holds forms, governors divided. Inquest, Sylvester died of pneumonia leading to sepsis, says doctor. And that's a new revelation about Sylvester Romani, the boy that died, you know, in that school a few months ago. You get the details of that story on page 4 and page 5. And on page 12, rumored planned police strike fake, mischievous, and this is coming from the force headquarters. These are some of the major stories on the Punch.
All right, now let's take a look at other papers this morning, talking about, say, the This Day. For instance, if you look at the This Day, the lead story talks about convention, microzoning tearing APC apart amid leadership crisis. And it has other stories at the top there. Says nationwide blackout as power grid collapses again. You'd find the next story. Wiki attacks Obaseki, calls him serial betrayer. ungrateful. And then the next one, Atiku to formally declare presidential bid, March 23. Well, these are some of the stories on the This Day newspaper this morning.
On The Guardian, CBN in fresh plan to wean banks of cash handling risks and costs. Some of the riders there states moves to license shared cash hub operators, considers areas with large banking activities to accommodate individuals, corporate entities with huge cash needs, restricted to transaction not below 500,000. You'd see all the stories, an editorial on the top. On page 2, Russia-Ukraine war and biting realities in Nigeria. And you'd also see the story about outrage as ASU extends strike by 2 months. PDP, not your personal property. Obaseki hits back at Wike. You see also the story about Abakari's wife slums in court. NDLEA remands husband, 6 others. Chaos at airports as fuel scarcity disrupts operations. And you'd also see the story about Nigeria may lose 170,000 BPD as Shell Ajib declare force majeure. And then you see amid costly diesel, grid collapses 24 hours after Genco's warning. These are some of the major stories from The Guardian.
All right, and now on the National Star newspaper, we take a look at a few stories there. The lead story talks about, PDP crisis, Wike Obaseki trade insults, and then you'd also find in Edo, we don't accept political bullies, and that's according to the governor of Edo State, Obaseki. Obaseki is zero betrayer, says Rivers governor. So we see a trade of words there. Also, we see other stories. Tension as police return, beef up security at APC headquarters. Other stories, Bambishe, manhunt begins for other culprits. And then autumn advocates fresh national conference. And then you have other stories there. Suspended DCP Abakari's wife slums in court. And that's, it caused quite a stir yesterday. At the very top there, you see FG kicks as ASU extends strike for 8 weeks. And then, of course, the story about nationwide blackout as national grid collapses. These are some of the stories on the front page there of the new National Star.
Okay, let's take a look at some of the stories making headway on the Blueprint newspaper. NBET, Genco's in blame game as national grid collapses. You see the riders there. Lagos, Kaduna, Enugu, Ebonyi, 3 others was hit. Power Minister summons discos, TCN, NBET, others. And then you'd also see NBET responsible for poor power supply. And this is according to Genco's. No, they lack power to generate 9,000 megawatts. And this is coming from NBET. And you see also the story about cocaine deal, carries wife slums in court. Embattled DCP deserves no bail. This is coming from the NDLEA. You find other stories on the Blueprint. We have 3 days to shut down airlines, warn over aviation fuel scarcity. Ekiti Guba. INEC publishes final list of candidates. JAM remits 600 million naira to CBT centers. You'd also see the story about petroleum marketers, manufacturers grown as diesel hits 750 naira per litre. On page 5, Wike to Obaseki, you are a betrayer. That's a war of words. You find details of that story on page 5. And on page 21, GTB, Zenith Bank, 8 others grow combined profit by 120 billion naira. These are some of the major stories on the Blueprint.
Well, the story on the Business Day newspaper this morning is not any different, of course. Talking about the power outage, deepening Nigeria's woes. Of course, we know that that's a lingering problem from decades ago. Now, let's get perspectives on some of the stories on our front pages this morning. And we have in the studio Ali M. Ali, who is the Deputy President, Nigerian Guild of Editors, to talk about these stories with us. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on Daybreak.
Well, good morning. Good morning, viewers. It's good to be here once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it looks like energy problems are compounding more and more. We are talking about aviation fuel here. We are talking about diesel here. We are talking about fuel scarcity itself and gas as well. And, just as all of this is happening also, we are seeing that the national grid is collapsing. What exactly is going on?
Well, you get the feeling that the country is grinding to a halt. That's the feeling you get. Add to this mix also is the increasing devaluation of the nation's currency. So you get this feeling that the country is gradually grinding to a halt. And I think one of the headlines, airlines also lamented the rising cost of Jet 1 fuel, which in the next 72 hours, if something dramatic is not done, as dramatic as having a fixed price, and I think they are advocating for 500 naira per liter of Jet 1 fuel. Already the cost of air travel is prohibitive. People can't move freely, thereby affecting production, if you like, because in our part of the world, movement is also production. If you don't move, you can't produce. Yeah. But with these itemized energy challenges we have, especially power, small-scale industries, they can operate without constant power supply. And they more often than not rely on privately generated power, like, for example, generator, but the cost of diesel, which has been deregulated long ago, is so prohibitive. And then you look at petrol, even the queues, notwithstanding the marching orders NNPC has given, NNPC, repeatedly assuring Nigerians that fuel shortage will be a thing of the past. But look at it, everywhere you see queues. And then the bridging system, because most of the bridging is done by fuel tankers, and they are powered by diesel engines. And diesel is prohibitive. And making the current price regime unsustainable, unless you're playing ostrich, you know that we can't go on. I'm just being practical here. In as much as it's desirable to have lower cost of petroleum products, but in practical terms, if you're looking at it pragmatically, it's impossible to have that. It's not possible to have that. Why? Because, like I said, look at the cost of diesel. Look at the cost of transportation. But all this tells you that this is the net result of years of planlessness. I've always said that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. If we had been planning all these years, like we have done in the past, especially after the Civil War, you find out, if you go back to history, that every now and again, the government will come with 2, 3, 5-year rolling plan, that in the next 5 years, this is what we're going to do. But look at us now.
So, in other words, this circumstance has brought us face to face, with the need to have our refineries working.
Long overdue, long overdue. But you don't have to be a soothsayer to say that it was just a matter of time before we get to this pathetic state. What I mean pathetic, because if you look at our consumption, the consumption of domestic consumption of fuel, and then you look at the output, and then look at the total collapse of our refineries, all of them, zero refining in the last couple of years. Notwithstanding monies allocated for turnaround, it's there, it's in the public space. But we've been refining zero, literally zero.
And the lead story on the Daily Trust this morning, talking about, the likely loss of about 1.2 billion naira daily over Ajib oil export cut. There's vandalism also that we're still, talking about till date. And now there is, rise in the global price of crude oil, and we are not able to meet up with all of that. I mean, where does that leave us?
And then, like you said, with sabotage, which has been consistent in the last couple of years, especially with the coming of democracy in 1999, you realize that we've had these pipeline vendors. Sabotage is something that has been there for ages, and we've not been able to check that. And then insecurity, on the other hand. One way or the other is that there are linkages between sabotage, insecurity, and even, again, if you like, fifth columnist, even within the oil and gas industry, even with the management of our oil companies managing our oil resources, you find so much sabotage beyond the blowing up pipelines, then even the management itself. So all this in the mix, then you know that the future is certainly looking bleak. What do we do now? But it's a whole lot of things for us to get out of this quagmire. But it has been a vicious cycle. We may know the problems, but then do we have what it takes to fix the problems? If you look at why...
It appears that we'll be managing the problem. So each time it happens like that, we'll find a way to just, you know, suppress it.
Yeah, we gloss over the problem. We look at the effect. We don't look at the causes of the problems. We just merely look at that, and then we gloss over it. Then we have some, if you like, some cosmetic solution. After a while, it comes back and bites us in the butt. It has been like a vicious cycle. So what do we do? If you look at, in the past, when we have vandals blowing up pipelines, and then economic saboteurs also, you have to also be mindful of even those who manage the oil installation. Some of them cannot be totally blameless of what's going on there. Instances of where there is connivance. It's been there. If you ask a non-governmental organization keeping an eye on our oil sector, you find out there is a lot of connivance even. First, we underdeclare the amount of oil drilled daily. Some is being diverted. At a point, I think last year, the group managing director of the NNPC lamented, I think before the Nigerian Navy, that about 200,000 barrels of fuel, oil, is unaccounted. It's been siphoned out of the country. Who does that? How does that happen? And that's a lot of money, 200,000 barrels per day, disappeared into thin air. How do you even account for that? So yes, you get this feeling that we are going around in cycle, we are in this deep, the further we do, but unless you take certain drastic measures and then exert the political way, elsewhere you don't do that. There are other countries who are also oil producing countries. But the laxity in security, in management of the resources, of the natural resources, is it as it is in our country? That's the question. Angola, Brazil, these are oil-producing nations. They may have their own peculiar problem, but certainly not to the extent of where Nigerians, in the extent of Nigeria. And also, people who think also that natural resources domicile in their enclave is their exclusive preserve. The mindset. There are people who think that oil resources or whatever resources they have is for their exclusive use.
Yeah. But I would think, I tend to think that we've come of that, those days where, vandalism was done basically because people in those regions feel like this is ours, and so we have the right, and so whatever, But what we see, more recently is more like a different kind of attack for a different reason, maybe for some economical reasons.
Yeah, well, that may be so, but then also, before we got to that, partly, like you said, economic reasons, but then the idea is that there are some other people who are benefiting from that economic, if you like, largesse, which they think they're not benefiting. There are people who, up to this moment, you see, look at the provision of the Petroleum Industry Act. There is a certain percentage that should be given to the oil-producing areas. Even that has not assuaged that. Well, some provisions of the Petroleum Industry Act have been suspended, like the withdrawal of subsidy now, for example, which we're going to continue with subsidy regime till 2023, which is it even tenable? But you see, all that has to do with even the political will to do some of these things, to really implement some of the provision to the latter.
Some are saying that, look, we are already feeling the brunt, of the petroleum sector in our economy. So why don't we just remove the subsidy and just face it?
Yes, I think it's a very romantic idea to just remove the cap on subsidy. Elsewhere, look at globally rising cost of energy. If you look at other climes, in the UK, in Europe generally, In the United States, the cost of energy has gone up. People are lamenting that. But if you are to look at it, some of our problems are self-inflicted. If we had planned well, police our borders. Because we must, this thing is native to us. I mean, oil generally. And if you look at oil, the byproducts we get from oil, look at the value chain. But we take our crude oil, and then we get the refined oil. And in the process, a lot of the value chain there is lost in transmission. Or we don't get that. So if we had improved the capacity of our refineries first, and then work on them to work full capacity, even at full capacity, if they are produced, the combined strength of our refining capacity, for a nation that up to now, we can't say for a fact how many liters of fuel we consume daily, but the combined capacity of our refineries, all three of them, the one in Kaduna, the one in Warri, the one in Port Harcourt, and I think this is about the three of them, there is less than 1/4 of our daily consumption. Some people say we consume as high as 5 million liters per day. But you look at the capacity, the refining capacity of our petroleum, I mean our refineries, all of them, it's less than 500,000. Kaduna is, I think, 220,000 liters per day. The one in Warri, 160, and then the one in Port Harcourt, also about that. So you look at it, all of them, less than 500,000. But hopefully with the coming of the Dangote refinery, perhaps, but even at that, it's less than 1 million liters per day. So unless we plan very well, look at our exponential growth as a people. Nigeria's population, the demand, but some people even argue otherwise, the likes of former CBN governor, that the amount of subsidy given, there is a lot of fraud there. But it's important that oil native to us, we must find a way to refine it locally. And that way we can boost even employment. But as it is now, the conglomerate, that is NNPC, which has been unbundled with courtesy of the Petroleum Industry Act, has not been alive to its responsibilities.
All right, now I'd like for us to move away from that story about petroleum and gas now and take a look at sports. And I think the Daily Trust is about the only paper that picked that story about the federal government redeeming its house allocation promise to the 1994 Nations Cup winners. That's a long time ago. And
it is. It is.
Till 2022.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about morale and the implication of that to youngsters who are aspiring to also make Nigeria proud in the sporting sector.
That's quite a while. If you remember in 1980 when Nigeria won for the first time, I think, the African Nations Cup, immediately they were rewarded with a lot of recognition. A car at the time, 1980, that's 42 years ago, and I think a house. And then in 1996 also, no, was it 96 when some of them, I think, no, under Buhari, 1984, when for the first time the Golden Eaglets won the maiden under-16 World Cup. They were giving recognition, and I think instant reward. But in this instance, nearly 20 years later, is it 20 or 30 years later, I think? 1994 to date. Almost 28 years later,
yes.
Only 28 years later. And I think the government from then till date, we're not exploiting, as a government is not exploiting this occasional soccer sports glory we have, which binds the country. You know, football is about the only thing that binds Nigerians together. You see Nigerians having a united stand when it comes to soccer, sports generally. And I think, like you said, it will be an incentive for young people now. And then soccer, if you look at globally, soccer now, for some countries, is a major revenue foreign exchange earner. You understand? Africans play in foreign leagues, especially European leagues.
Yes.
They make the money they send back home. What do they call it now in economic terms?
FDI.
Yeah, they get a lot of resources coming. Some of the money we got, about 10% of our foreign earnings, was through Nigerians living in diaspora. And football, indeed sports stars, they're sending home tons of cash to their relatives, to our family. So I think it's important that government, when it makes pledges like that, it's important to immediately redeem them. Otherwise,
thankfully it's coming now, though. They
well,
say
better late than never.
Better late than never.
Yes, better
but
late
I'm
than
just wondering that some of those players from that Nations Cup in 1994 are doing pretty well. That, you know, these houses at this time, maybe at that time it may mean, you know, quite a lot, but at this time, you know,
yeah,
will it mean anything?
28 years later, some of them, they have really, exactly.
Have become super rich. And
well,
if you look at what they are giving now and
but there are others also
own.
who have become not exactly a success story. I remember one of them, until recently, it was in the public domain, that he was so literally living in penury. His colleagues had to come to his rescue. Dealing with it was in the public.
Yes, I recall.
You know, so
but now drives a bus. I mean,
precisely, yeah, to make a living. So
yeah.
You understand. So it's not all that sweet and the kind of thing. There are people who also live in penury. Remember, in the days of yore, most sports stars are not really even besides their football skills, which was quite admirable. They don't have any other skills. Some of them did not go beyond a certain level of education. And you need, even if you are successful, materially successful, you need to have certain degree of useful skill away from the football pitch to succeed. Superstars, sports superstars in other climes. For example, if you look at those who play basketball, professional basketball in the United States, some of them, they have multiple degrees. Someone like Shaq O'Neal, his PhD, and after his retirement from active basketball, he invested, he's making a lot of money. Someone like Hakeem Olajuwon also, you understand? Away from basketball, he made tons of money invested. Some of our football stars, soccer stars, even those who played in foreign leagues, when they returned home, they couldn't manage the success they've had. Mm-hmm. And then in a matter of time, you find them living in penury because they couldn't manage, they don't have the skills to manage these resources they've garnered. And then some of them made bad choices. And today they are biting their fingers.
The lesson there is that, I mean, no matter how skillful you are or talented you are, it's always very important to match that with education and knowledge.
Exactly, with education and knowledge and sound advice, because it takes knowledge, some education, to even get to listen, to be influenced by sound advice. Otherwise, if you don't look at this great sports boxing star, Mike Tyson, he made tons of money, but today, until his recent comeback, not through boxing, but through other sports-related, you know, he mismanaged the resources he had because he had limited education.
All right. Well, we have also some other interesting stories really this morning. The APC convention and the APC crisis is a story that we've been seeing right from last week till this week. You know, the crisis has just been snowballing from one level to another and all of that. And we just wonder whether there's an end to this and whether this will have an impact, you know, on their convention on March 26th.
Certainly it would have an impact. But you see, crisis is where, when you see crises are inevitable in any system. But the ability to resolve the conflict or the crisis is what counts. Sometimes when there's this graveyard silence, it portends bad news. When you have everything is going on autopilot, everything's going on smoothly, something is not right. But the problem with APC is that its conflict resolution mechanism is either not there or is very weak. Otherwise, we've seen this happen with the PDP. But PDP, if you recall, in the 16 years it held sway at the center, it had a very strong conflict resolution mechanism. Every now and again, when they have conflicts like this, they say it was a family affair, and then they will resolve it. And then somehow, the leaders of the party at the time had a way of accommodating vested interests. But in this instance, you'll find out that the party is interlocked in this lingering conflict because there is an absence of a workable conflict resolution mechanism.
But I thought that there's a committee that was set up, you know,
for reconciliation.
Yes, for reconciliation, headed by Abdullahi Adamu, that even, you know, received petitions from members to address their grievances and all that.
But has it really resolved some of the state chapters that engulf in crisis? Like, for example, the Kano The Kano chapter is still in court. The one in Bauchi is still in court. So, but what has that resolved, really, in the real sense? But you see, more than anything else, the latest crisis now would bedevil the party till the convention period. And it's just a matter of time. And I think in today's, I think in Blueprint, in the course of the headline, I think one of the senators there, I think Ali Indume was saying that, look, the position of the 19 governors, which the governor of Kaduna State announced as responsible for the ouster, the supposed ouster of the caretaker committee chairman, the governor of Yobe State, their position would prevail. We are talking of 19 governors. After how many? 22 or 3?
But there will be, if they insist on that position, isn't that going to have a negative, a very disastrous implication?
Certainly.
Perhaps the convention may not even hold.
No, well, the convention is going to hold because I think the Federal High Court yesterday vacated that order. It's going to hold. And then the Constitution is very clear on what the powers of a political party. You cannot stop a political party according to the...
yes, so but now, if the governors are insisting that Buni should go out, should be taken out of the leadership, and you have INEC saying that they do not recognize any change in leadership and that the party needs at least 21 days to be able to hold that convention and so on and so forth. If you look at all of these timelines and and the formalities that needs to be taking, definitely it will mean that the convention will not hold.
Yeah, well, but that scenario is likely or unlikely to happen because I think the leader of the party, that's the president now, has thrown his weight behind Maimala Buni to conduct the convention. So I think that scenario is not likely to happen. But if, for example, that what you sketch prevailed, then the party is heading to the 2023 election without any presidential candidate. And certainly even gubernatorial candidate in some of the states, unless some of the elements move to another political party, hijack it, and then have their way. But if that scenario were to prevail, if that was to happen, then APC is just a matter of time before it implodes. Even now, people are they have this deep suspicion that March 26 convention, the fallout may not be manageable by the leaders of the APC, because if people fail to have their way, a lot of people are going to express their reservation or unhappiness if they fail to to have their way by maybe defection to other political parties. And that's why some other political parties, the likelihood of a third force. Already you will see that some people are experimenting with the idea of a third force somewhere else. For example, Rabi Musa Konkoso, notwithstanding that he has said, even in Daily Structure yesterday I heard him on BBC saying that he's still in PDP. But then he's using the NMP as a bargaining chip to flex his muscles, to see how relevant he may be at the center in national politics. But certainly back home in his home state, Konkoso is quite influential. He has a large followership. But at the national level now, maybe, perhaps, that's why he may not have the... it's still work in progress for him. So if APC goes ahead, which is likely that it will go ahead to hold the convention by March 26 under the leadership of Maimala Buni, and some of the aggrieved politicians, especially the governors, if they don't have their way, I see a lot of realignment of forces.
Oh, well, it's a deep, it's a tight corner here.
It is.
Because either way, there's still a problem. Yes. Whether you hold the convention, if you don't hold the convention, there's still a problem. So we'll get to see and we'll continue to follow up. Let's take a short break, and then when we come back, we'll round up on this segment of the show. Please stay with us. All right, thank you for staying with us. And if you are just joining, you're watching Daybreak, reaching you live from the nation's capital in Abuja. And we still have the Deputy President, Nigerian Guild of Editors, Ali M. Ali, in the studio with us, giving us perspectives on some of the stories on our front pages this morning. And of course, we are seeing also there's this trade of words between the governor of Rivers State, Nyesom Wike, and the governor of Edo State, Obaseki, they're calling each other traitors and all that. I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, it's sad, really, because these are leaders. They should be more circumspect in their utterances. I've always maintained that leaders are not like ordinary people. What they say impact on their followers. But coming at a time like this, you know that this is not unconnected with the 2023 election. And both Wike especially sees himself as the leader of the PDP, rightly or wrongly. He has this strong, and then in a way he feels that he's also partly responsible for the electoral success of somebody like Obaseki. And you know Obaseki, by his own nature, also abhors an overbearing, if you like, godfather. This is what caused his fallout with Oshimole,
yes,
and the people of Edo, remember, and APC made the mistake, fatal mistake, if you like, of having someone like Bola Tinubu to get directly involved with the politics of Edo, leading to the re-election of Obaseki. When the people of Edo say, look, Edo no be Lagos. You understand? And the same thing now, the Obaseki is saying, look, Edo is not Rivers in a way. This is why he's saying. That
he said that they don't accept political bullies.
Exactly.
Those were his words.
And exactly, more or less. You understand that, trying to resist this godfather-like disposition, yes, of Wike. Wike has been behaving like a godfather in the party. If you take it or leave it, because he's more than anybody. If you remember, the 2019 election, the primaries was held in Rivers State, and Wike was the sitting governor at the time. To show his power, people say Wike is responsible largely for hoisting the leadership of the PDP, that it was him who bankrolled the PDP convention. It's there in the public space. So he sees himself rightly, and then because he's keenly interested in the 2023 election, either as presidential candidate or vice presidential aspirant. I mean, he's not made it known, but if you look at his permutation, his alliances, but then he has one, if you like, to me, both of them have one tragic, if you like, almost tragic flaw. They are verbally unrestrained. There are things that you do. There are comments you don't make. Let others do the comment. The same way that Umahi dissed the judiciary and to a lesser extent the media. And then Umahi is also relying on the judiciary to reclaim his validated mandate in court. So, and then at the same time, like Hausa people will say, you've not crossed the river, you are busy insulting the crocodile. This is what he's doing. You need the judiciary. The same way, if Wike, you need the support of everyone. There is a way you can express your dissatisfaction without going to the public domain and washing your dirty linens. But either way, both of them are an example of how not to communicate. But it's something that has happened. If you look at Autumn, look at other governors, who the way they speak like area boys. That's my own take, my understanding. There are things you don't just say, just like you know as an anchor here. There are things you are not allowed to say on air. You can't, no matter how passionate you are about that, because of the spiral effect it will have on your viewers and listeners. So, and then you have people commanding executive authority. Wike, Obaseki, these are people, if they sign on the death warrant of inmates, they'll be killed. And then you are talking like area boys. So it's unfortunate, and I think their handlers should find a way to prevail on them. Not just them, any other leader, whatever level. It could be at a very senior level as a governor. It could be as something as at a relatively down there like a councillor. You have to be mindful of your spoken and even written words. Otherwise, you inflame a lot of passions, and then destroy bridges of friendship.
Well, thank you so much for coming on Daybreak. We'll have to end this session at this point. We appreciate your coming. We look forward to having you again.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes. We've been speaking with the Deputy President, Nigeria Guild of Editors, Ali M. Ali. He is our reviewer for today, taking a look at the stories on our front pages, and their implication on our, political economy, generally speaking.
But in a situation where you find that look at the
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that